My name is Charlene Platon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fifth Window. And thank you so much for joining us for our June 2021 Spotlight today. I first just want to say happy Juneteenth and happy Pride Month. And we're really excited today because we have a very special guest joining us. And before we introduce our guest speaker for today, I did just want to highlight that we actually do these monthly spotlights to highlight the profession of nursing and also highlight nurses as well as their self-care journeys and journeys for well-being. And so for today, we have our co-founders on the call, and they will be able to screen questions that are mentioned during the spotlight. And just to let you know, this is a live stream, so we are actively streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And so feel free to drop in a comment or a question in the chat, and we'll be able to field the questions and respond as much as we can. And so we will just start with introductions. And first, I'd like to have Jillian introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jillian Littlefield. I'm a nurse and also co-founder of Fifth Window, and also pursuing a graduate degree in psychiatric to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner currently. Thank you for all of you joining. Thank you for joining us today. And thanks to Alyssa for joining us as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jillian. And Jillian will be helping to screen any questions. So definitely feel free to engage with us during this spotlight. And so now, without further ado, we are really excited to announce our June 2021 spotlight guest. That is Alyssa Saquilayan. And Alyssa Saquilayan, BSN, RN, NCBC, is a board-certified nurse coach, yoga teacher, and Reiki practitioner who empowers women of color to heal their relationship with their body so that they can embody their inner strengths and radiate confidence. As a second-generation Filipina American recovering from a binge eating disorder, she learned that there aren't enough spaces for women of color to discuss their bodies. And by bridging science and spirituality, she encourages lasting lifestyle changes that help others deeply reconnect with themselves, reprogram thoughts, and heal holistically. It's her soul's calling to co-create transformation and help others discover their core essence. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation with you and the Fifth Window team. So really grateful.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here. And Alyssa, I feel like I've been following your journey for some time now. I'm so glad we were able to be connected through Keith, who's also another guest that we've had in the past. And he's a wonderful nurse and nurse coach and also advocate for self-care. And so we're really excited to learn more about you and your journey with nursing and self-care. And can you start with telling us a little bit about your journey in nursing and how, what led you to pursue nursing, and which positions did you pursue in your journey so far, and why?
Yeah, of course. Great question. So I graduated from nursing school in 2013, and in nursing school, I absolutely fell in love with the preventative side of nursing. So after getting my BSN and becoming a nurse and getting my license, I started working in the community. I worked in corporate health, in primary care. Also did some school nursing where I worked one-on-one with medically fragile students and those who were also needing that extra support from a nurse to really thrive in the classroom. And then after that, I did do a little bit of home health. And currently I'm working with a company that is focused on community health. We helped with the mass vaccinations here in the Bay Area and helped with one of the largest mass vaccination sites at the Oakland Coliseum and also in San Mateo. So it's been a journey, and I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that as a nurse, one of the, I guess, like thoughts and beliefs I had to really dismantle was that you don't have to work in the hospital for a year or whatever, or 6 months, you've been told, or been taught. As a nurse, I think we have such a great opportunity to expand our horizons and follow our passions. So I'm really grateful that I followed my heart in going into these different fields in nursing.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing. And we really just love hearing about nurses who pursue different paths, because I agree. I think that there is a lot of room for nursing outside of acute care and outside of the hospital. And there have been, and it's just so interesting to hear about how nurses have found themselves in these different career paths, including yours. And I think that's one great thing to have people know, is that nursing is actually a very diverse profession. There's a lot of things going on, and it's evolving day by day, year by year, and now with entrepreneurship. And so it's, and speaking of that, we just love to learn about your coaching too. And, what really brought you to wellness coaching? And was there anything in particular that brought you to that path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think because I was so interested in figuring out how I can thrive as a nurse outside of the hospital, I was kind of going through this. I was navigating this world of me wanting to help people take ownership of their health. And I initially thought that I wanted to be a nurse and like a fitness trainer or something like that, because I also really love movement. And so one day I literally just Googled nurse coach, and I stumbled upon a article written by the Nurse Coach Collective, which is the program that I went through, and read what the definition of a nurse coach was, and I fell in love. So as a nurse coach, it is still in line with helping patients and helping clients heal from a more preventative side of that care. So, I think all throughout nursing school, being in clinicals and even seeing my family, my mom is also a nurse and my sister is a nurse, seeing my family work in the hospital, and then knowing that the patients there, majority of them are ill with these chronic diseases and chronic illnesses that are preventable through lifestyle changes. And that really struck a chord with me. And I wanted to be on the other side of nursing and helping folks set goals, helping people stay accountable, and then also really just getting to the root cause of their barriers, their health barriers. So that really was one of the main reasons that called me to go into coaching, was to continue this path of really helping folks take ownership of their health in the way that serves them. I think we're given so much information from the outside and external world on how to do things, and there's not really a right way, and the only right way is the one that works for you.
Right. I love that. And I completely agree. I think it could be really easy to pigeonhole yourself into the ideal nurse, or what you think a nurse should be or do. And it was interesting. It kind of takes me back to our very first nursing spotlight with our group. We interviewed Aaliyah Aaron, and she is another nurse entrepreneur. And she had a great talk about her journey in tech. And it's also a very different path than what one would traditionally think of nursing. And there was one nurse who was watching the spotlight, and they actually were in the process of pursuing a nurse practitioner degree. But then after watching the talk and after some other careful consideration, they actually decided to withdraw their acceptance into UCSF, which is actually one of the best F&P programs in the country. And then they decided to pursue nursing informatics, which is what their real passion was. And I was like, oh my gosh, that warms my heart. But it really made me think about, people really, a lot of people that I've met and that I've seen, they think that they have to be an NP, for example. So they just pursue this degree, but it may not necessarily be their passion. So I really love what you said. And I love hearing about your journey. And I feel like I didn't even know about what nurse coaching was until I met Keith. And that was literally the first time I heard about a nurse coach. So I think it's awesome that you Googled it, because I would not have even thought of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really awesome to hear. And I love your emphasis on preventative coaching and preventative healing, because there's really that part that I feel like has just been missing in medicine and needs to grow. So it's just really inspiring to hear about that part of your journey. And transitioning to this type of a career path could be pretty daunting, right? Because it's not a typical path, I guess. And what was that like for you? How was the transition? Did you have like any particular hardships that you wanted to share, or like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I also just wanted to piggyback on the fact that nurses are such amazing people, and that there is a nurse for every like a nurse is put on this earth for their own specific specialty. And I just really commend and I honor like all of the nurses who are working in the hospital, all of the nurses who are working in acute care, especially those who were working during the pandemic. I think it is so, they really are heroes in that field. And I think, they have such a great, amazing, strong heart to be in that space. And yeah, in terms of my transition, I feel like it was really seamless, because prevention and health prevention and coaching kind of go hand in hand anyways. And so being in that mindset and knowing that in my heart, my purpose is to really be of service. It's not about me, and it's not about my title, and it's not about, all these letters behind my name, but it's really knowing that in my own personal journey and what I went through as, a woman of color who was experiencing this, body dysmorphia and like, navigating an eating disorder and feeling so alone, I wish I had known someone, like whether it was a coach or a peer or someone who I could openly talk to about it and know that I wasn't alone. And, of course I went to like, therapy and things like that. And that was great. It was very, very helpful. However, I still felt alone, because as a woman of color experiencing a binge eating disorder in a society that is very, focused on like a white ideal or thinness and being tall. And because eating disorders have this image of it only affecting, a specific type of person, I felt very alone. So I think, that was really one of the pillars to my me going into this nurse coaching path.
Right, and thank you so much for sharing that, Alyssa. I think it's so important that that you share that and that you are open about that, because I do think that that's something that people don't actually really talk about, and you don't really hear a lot about this in nursing in particular. Or I know I from my own personal experience, it hasn't really been discussed, just like many other types of challenges that happen within for nurses within the field. And I also do want to thank you for recognizing the nurses in acute care who've been working during the pandemic. I think it's great to recognize all the nurses and all their contributions that they have for the profession. And in terms of your own journey with supporting, women of color, I think that that's a great platform. I personally, for myself as a woman of color, and just knowing about the just what you said about how these different challenges could be portrayed in only one light per se, and not necessarily sharing others' experiences. I think that's really great to bring awareness to, since it might not be something that others really think about. And in coaching women of color, and having women who might have body dysmorphia or any other challenges that are related. Can you first actually tell us more about what body dysmorphia is, or how would you define that, and is there anything that people should know about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so body dysmorphia is this hyper focus on the flaws or what we don't like about our body. And for me, it showed up when I would look at myself in the mirror and I had extreme dissatisfaction, and I just felt like I wasn't looking at myself. And more specifically, I felt like I was looking at a body that was larger than the body that I was in. And this type of mentality can at times take over and affect all different areas, all the other areas of our life. And for me specifically, I was very consumed by it, that it affected my nutrition, the things that I eat, my diet, the physical activity, and also in my relationships, and how I noticed I wasn't being as fully present in my social relationships and in my intimate relationships as well. So it is, it's something I feel like a lot of women experience, and we don't talk about it a lot. I think that it becomes the termed or coined disorder is when it really, really starts to impact our mental health. Yeah.
Right. And thank you so much for sharing about that, and explaining more about what that can look like and how that can show up. And, I do agree. I do think a lot of women do have challenges with body dysmorphia. And I think that it's really not talked about a lot. And I mean, I think in a lot of ways, our society might, normalize it in some ways, and, not really think of it as a huge challenge. And for your own personal journey, how did you finally know that it was body dysmorphia? Because I feel like it could be so hard to tell sometimes when you're experiencing this type of a challenge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also wanted to add that I think body dysmorphia can also affect men. It's really interesting that when I started talking about it more on my social media, there were also men who reached out to me and said, hey, this is something that a lot of men also experience, because, men are expected to be this, macho, like fit, muscular person. And I think as a woman going through and experiencing the body dysmorphia, there's so much pressure, I feel like, and also being like a second generation Filipino American and a child of immigrants, I was taught to assimilate, right? And sometimes I felt like I was othered or alienated, especially, growing up in this kind of society. So I think I started to notice that it was impacting my health when it led to an eating disorder. And so I think that, there was a point in my life where I felt like I was just not myself. I didn't have any joy. I was really just overconsumed with, my next meal while I was eating my current meal, or like when I was going to have time to exercise. And it really took away, like I said, from really being present in my relationships. And so at that time, I really took it upon myself to seek support and even talk to my parents about it, because in our culture, there is sometimes this also this focus on the body. And for me growing up, I always heard things like, oh, like you're getting so skinny, or, oh, you're getting a little chubby. And I think I've internalized a lot of those messages. And so when I started to notice these thoughts come up more and more in my life, and it impacting just my mental health, I knew that I had to do something. And it really helped to, seek therapy and go to coaching even, and remind myself that it doesn't matter what our body looks, it doesn't matter. Like, confidence isn't something that is a product of how we look, or what exercise we perform, or the food that we eat. It is something that is cultivated within ourselves. And I think everyone has access to that, because we're all born as whole, innately loving, innately enough. And that there are these messages in our society that have told us otherwise, but those messages are not true. So.
Mm-hmm. And you've shared a lot of powerful comments there, and there's just so many things I want to talk about there, because you said so many important things, and just very eloquently in just a short amount of time. and first I wanted to point out, thank you for mentioning how much this can impact men too, because I think that's another side of this challenge where people don't think about as much, right? Because it's been so heavily, I think, focused on towards women, that it's really, I mean, that is a really great perspective to also keep in mind. And I really appreciate that you mentioned that and acknowledge that. And I also really resonate with what you said about your upbringing as a second generation Filipina American. And I completely know where you're coming from, because it's been internalized throughout my childhood as well, especially about, how you look, how much you weigh. It's a comment that your tita might always talk about at a party, and it's a lot of pressure to look a certain way, but then at the same time, living up to expectations to eat a lot at a party. It's very confusing. So it's really challenging. And I mean, I could definitely see how this would be such a challenging journey for multiple reasons. And when it comes to well-being and I feel like in nursing, it's so hard, right, to even talk about that or have these conversations. And I wonder, are a lot of the people that you coach, are they also nurses? And have you seen, is there a way that you've seen being able to tap into nursing well-being, or do you have any thoughts about how nurses can prioritize their own well-being as well, in terms of, I'm not sure if any of your clients have shared this with you, if they are nurses, or just in general, what your experiences might have shown up like.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing as well, sharing that commonality in terms of being, Filipina too. I think, like, again, it's something we don't talk about enough, and this is my mission, is to be able to bring light to this and have these conversations and normalize it. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that with me. In terms of well-being for nurses, yes, I have worked with a few nurses who have reached out to me with the intention of improving their body image and their relationship to their body, or their relationship to food. And it's really interesting how it plays out, because that, it's on the surface level, that's what it is. And then it becomes something even deeper. I have a nurse who reached out to me wanting to improve their lifestyle and, exercise more and, eat healthier and balance their life amongst their family, and just, be better with time management. And one of the barriers that came up for her was her relationship with her partner, and how sometimes we think that there is this initial goal that we have, but really there's something deeper beneath that. And for her, she was also working in a health setting that wasn't giving her much joy. So in coaching together, I think it's such a beautiful journey, because we work for, typically my program is for 12 weeks, and each week we're just kind of unraveling these different layers and really getting to the root cause. So I think it's just such a beautiful journey, because there's just so many different layers to health. We talk about, and I really firmly believe in holistic health. We talk about, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. And I think if I was to encourage any nurse out there to prioritize their well-being, I think a good first step is just to pause and really check in with yourself and ask yourself, okay, how is my body feeling today? How is my mind feeling today? How is my heart feeling today? How am I feeling spiritually? What's my energy like? And just taking that moment to take an inventory of like where we really are. I think.
Oh, so I think she might have disconnected. So I will just give her. Oh, there.
Sorry, I don't know what
Hi,
happened.
Lisa. No worries.
I don't know when it got
no
cut
worries.
off.
Not a problem. I think you were mentioning about the different dimensions of well-being, and then talking about that relation to nursing.
Okay, I was on a roll.
I know. I was very engrossed in it.
I think I was going on about how nurses can start to prioritize their well-being, and if I could offer anything, it'd be just an invitation to do a check-in, like pause and just check in with yourself and do like a quick inventory of asking like, okay, how is my body feeling today? How is my heart feeling today? How is my mind feeling today? And how is like my energy or my spirit feeling today? And being able to do that with like no judgment too, and just simply being an observer of what that is for us. I think as nurses, you know, we're put under a lot of pressure, and we want to serve and give as much as we can. And I think we hear this so much, right? It's like that compassion fatigue, and we're doing so much we forget about ourselves. So just taking a moment to really just like pause and look at what's happening, you know, in our well-being, and looking at that wheel of health. I think is a great first step.
Right. I agree completely. And I do love how you said that the first step really should just be to pause, because I think when we talk about well-being, it could sometimes feel overwhelming just to talk about, okay, now I have to prioritize my well-being. I have to exercise a lot now, or I have to meditate a lot now. And it just could feel really big. And but really the first step is just like you said, to pause, and that it could really just be that inventory that you spoke of, and really taking, you know, it could even be a minute or two just to check in and say, hey, how have I been feeling for the past year with the pandemic, or the past hour? I think it's so important to just notice that and to be aware of that. So so I think that's really great insight, really great advice for nurses, especially because nurses are so busy. I mean, they have a lot going on in the workplace, maybe also in their personal lives, and so that's I mean, especially with the past year, there's just been challenge after challenge. So it's really important to remember to pause, and to remember to check in with yourselves on these various, levels of well-being, which is really important. All those different things that you mentioned, and I was wondering too, with your own journey of well-being, is there any? How do you maintain your well-being too? Because I know it's really challenging to do that sometimes, and we just love to hear about how nurses have been able to maintain their well-being, or is there any tips or any things that you'd like to share about your own routines?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I love this question so much. I just wanted to also piggyback on that inventory that you were talking about, that we were talking about. And you're right, it can get really overwhelming to do that inventory and check in with ourselves. And for me, when I do that sometimes, can sometimes feel this sense of judgment. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not at the place that I need to be. I'm not at the health that I want to be. And we naturally, as human beings, have this like negativity bias, and we'll go through a list of all the things that are wrong with our health. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that this inventory and checking in is not to do that. It's not to judge or criticize, but it's really just to check in and observe. And then also, I think what is really helpful for me sometimes is acknowledging all of the really great things that I have accomplished. I think we don't celebrate ourselves enough when we could take a step back and look at all of the things we've accomplished, whether how big or small it is. It's always worth to give yourself credit for all of that. Even if it's just waking up in the morning and like remembering to brush your teeth or something like that. And so, yeah, for me, I think it's one of my personal practices that I like to do that helps with my self-care and my well-being is giving myself so much grace. Like giving myself so much permission to be human and make mistakes and be imperfect, because that's, you know, what makes us uniquely us. And also, one thing that has been a really big game changer for me is having some kind of morning ritual. This book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod is something I really recommend. I read it when I first started my self-development journey, and it has helped me, one, just really ground myself before giving to other people at the beginning of my day, and two, just helping me create, like, do that inventory, and then three, just creating a special moment that for me that really aligns with me, that will help me really thrive throughout the rest of my day. And I think it's so important to create a morning ritual that really works for you, because, you know, we can also go into that judgment again of, oh, I have to exercise, I have to meditate, I have to journal, I have to read, I have to go for a walk. Like, there's, I think, maybe just picking one thing, one thing that you feel like you need for that morning that will help set you up for success for the rest of the day.
Yes, thank you so much, Alyssa. I really love, well, thank you for sharing what you do to maintain your well-being, because I do think it's really important to share that and to talk about it. And I love how you mentioned, you know, giving yourself permission, you know, giving yourself grace, gratitude, and not pressuring yourself to check all these boxes for the sake of checking the boxes, you know. And it's hard, I feel like, for I think it could be hard for people, for nurses, because there could be a tendency to want to, you know, do everything, like everything possible, right? It's like, it's almost like I don't know. I know for myself, it's sometimes it could be like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do that, but then I just need to also reassure myself, like, oh, actually, I could also take a step back and I don't actually have to do all of it. I could just start with the one thing, just like you mentioned. And I really like how you mentioned having a ritual in the morning, because I do think it's the routine that makes a big difference. And I think it's really ingraining it so it's part of your day, and that it's really part of your routine, and that helps so much with your well-being journey. So I think that that's especially important. And it could just be the one thing, and even doing one thing is incredibly helpful. So thank you for sharing your insights and your tips. And I was oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I realized I didn't really give you specific examples on my personal, you know, self-care tips. So if I can add that, I can do that right now too.
Yeah, please do. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the morning ritual is definitely something, like, number one, the thing that I do to really prioritize my well-being. And what I like to do actually is I'll make a list of all of the self-care, all of the tools that help me with feeling good and bringing light and feeling joyful. My coach calls it a bliss list. And so on there, I'll have...
I love that.
Right? So on there, I'll have things like taking a deep breath, like setting a timer for a minute and just simply closing my eyes and breathing, journaling out my gratitudes, going out for a walk without any kind of technology and simply just being in nature and observing and absorbing the things around me. Exercising, and not really exercising because I want to get fit, but because it really makes me feel good. I know that the endorphins that I'm going to feel is going to help me throughout my day. Reading, meditating. I have like an altar that I've set up recently with like different elements of, air, water, earth. What's the other one I'm missing? Fire. So like candles and things like that with like photos of like my ancestors. And I really feel so supported by, the spiritual aspect and the spiritual world. So yeah, things like that. Those are just a few examples. And what I'll do is in the morning, I'll do that check-in, that inventory check-in, and I'll look at my list so I don't have to think about it too much. And I'll pick one or two things from that list that I feel like is going to serve me for that moment.
I love all those practices. I'm like writing notes. I'm glad this is being recorded, so now I could go back to what you said, because I love all those. I love all those practices that you mentioned. I really love how you mentioned having an altar, which really embodies all these different parts of your wellness. And I just love the connection to your ancestors too. I think that's an amazing way to incorporate these different ways to be connected, even to to family, to others who could support your journey. So I just think that's really amazing. And I agree with what you said, gratitude, journaling, going out in nature, which I really personally need to do a lot more of. I feel like I've become so much more of a homebody ever since the pandemic and just not going outside. So I think that bit of advice is more important now than ever. And I think exercising to feel good. I think that's actually a really big one. And it's so funny because I haven't really been as active. I'm getting back into my activity too. I was a lot more active before the pandemic, and now I'm striving towards that. But I recently purchased Just Dance on the Nintendo Switch, and it is so much fun. Oh my gosh, I just did that. I did it for like an hour yesterday, and it just feels so good to just move. So you could even start there for anyone who's listening and you love dancing. Just Dance is a great game, but you really sweat a lot too. But I think that those are all amazing, amazing tips. And thank you for sharing what you do personally within your own practices. And I also wanted to say, when it comes to nursing too, it could be really hard to talk about health, mental wellness, well-being in general. Could you tell us about the stigma of, wellness and healthcare or in nursing? And are there any steps that we can take to just, destigmatize that? And what can we do to start to have these as a part of our regular practice and in nursing? I mean, that's a pretty big question, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really huge topic. I feel like we can even have like another talk about that, because the destigmatizing of mental health is so huge. And again, going back to being like a woman of color, that is even more so in our culture, because for me at least, I was taught to stay quiet, not talk about mental health. Oh, it's not a thing. If you seek support, then it means you're crazy. Just stay where you are, pull your bootstraps up, maybe say a prayer and lift it up, lift it up to God, and everything will be okay.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. All the above. 100%.
And I think, nurses are like looked at as these like superheroes who can like do anything and everything. And it's actually, really harmful to view a nurse as someone like that and putting them on this pedestal, because they already are under so much pressure and wanting to ensure that their patients are safe and that they're, crossing off all of their tasks throughout the day. And so there's just so much pressure. And I personally feel like I experienced so much anxiety. I think I first experienced anxiety when I was doing my clinicals. And I think a way to destigmatize that is really to just, one, like create awareness and really start to recognize that mental health needs to be top of line priority in our nurses and our healthcare providers. I really hope that I wish in nursing school, there was more classes and education around how to, one, like just have emotional intelligence and being able to acknowledge and recognize what are these emotions that are coming up. What does it mean when my heart is beating fast? Like learning about fight or flight, not just in our patient population, but within ourselves and what that feels like. And being able to recognize if this is something that's really emotionally and mentally affecting us. And two is, I think, being able to openly talk about mental health as nurses and health professionals, and being able to normalize that, and normalizing that it's okay to seek support. Nurses absolutely can and will, I think would be beneficial to have like their support system, like therapists or coaches even. And if they're not ready to step into that space, being able to talk about mental health with their peers and maybe even their coworkers or their and maybe even their huddles or in their workplace. So I think it's evolving too now. I think a lot more nurses are opening up about their health and prioritizing their well-being, and there's so much more room for improvement and growth as well. And I think that's really great that you and this platform, Fifth Window, is pioneering that and really being at the forefront of encouraging our health professionals, health organizations, and nurses to focus on their well-being and self-care.
Yes, thank you so much, Alyssa. And you brought up a lot of great ways that we could begin to, work towards destigmatizing mental health in our culture of medicine and our culture of nursing. And it is a really big topic, and it's a silver lining of the pandemic is that there's been a lot more focus towards this. And I think it finally shed a light on the decades worth of burnout that's been experienced by nurses and healthcare professions. And now it's been shown in a big way with the pandemic. And so I do think that in the coming decades to come, there will just be a lot more focus in schools, a lot more in residencies and training. And we're just so glad to be all a part of it, and we're really thankful to you for being one of those pioneers as well, because these are all necessary conversations, and these are all the ways that we could integrate it in our practice on an individual level, on an organizational level. So I think that that's all really huge, and really commend you for your work on that too, because I know it's challenging, right, to be part of this journey and to help talk about these things that have been historically, stigmatized for a while, and in your own journey too in pursuing well-being. Have you found it hard for others to talk about their own journeys when it comes to well-being or mental health or anything related to that? Or do you feel like it's been more accepted when you shared your story? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first came out about my, recovery and binge eating and my body dysmorphia, one, a lot of people were really surprised because, you look at someone and they don't look like they have a mental illness. And in regards to an eating disorder, they were like, "Oh, you're so fit," or "You don't look like you have that." And that's the thing with mental health. It can affect everyone, and it doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter your shape or your size. It could affect anyone. And so once I started talking more about my journey and my mental health, it did, I feel like, gave so much permission for other people to talk about their journeys and their mental health as well. You know, it was really nice to hear that, like, oh my gosh, like, me too, or I've been there, or I completely understand, or I resonate. And I think
Oh, I think she, I'll wait for her to join again. Oh,
is that better?
oh, hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, welcome back.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Oh, no worries. But yeah, go ahead. I think you're talking about how others were starting to open up again, or open up about their own journeys.
Yeah, so I think when I opened up about my journey, it gave other people permission to do the same. And I think that when we have the courage to be vulnerable and share our stories, and it doesn't have to be on social media or in this public space, even just simply talking about it, I think gives other people permission to do the same. And of course, like, certain topics are a little bit easier to talk about. Like, I think, you know, talking about like anxiety or depression or PTSD is more accepted, and things around body image and relationship to food is a little bit more difficult because it can feel very shameful, or just because it's not widely talked about. So I think when I came from a place of sharing my story, not only for like my own liberation, but also with the intention of helping other people out there know that they are not alone in whatever they are experiencing in regards to their mental health or emotional health. It was like the voice that I wanted to hear when I was, you know, going through this journey myself.
Right. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I agree. I do think it is, depending on what the topic is, it could be really challenging to open up. And I'm really glad that you opened up about your journey, because it is important for others to hear about it. You're right when you said that, you know, mental illness really doesn't discriminate. It can impact anyone. It can impact you no matter your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, and so it really is one of those. I mean, you know, people call like depression the silent killer. It's really one of those um, uh, ways to think about mental illness and mental health. And so I think it's great that you were able to share your story, and that others have resonated with it. I think that a lot more people resonate with these challenges than we think, because it's just so historically not talked about that you really just don't know. But I think it impacts a lot more people than what you know, what others might say, and really could impact people that you had no idea it could impact. So it's, you know, we even saw with, like, for example, Meghan Markle's interview about her challenges with, you know, being a part of the royal family and how much that has impacted her mental health. And then we saw with the tennis player, Naomi Osaka, who recently pulled out of the tennis open. So it's people you wouldn't expect, right? They're in very, you know, they're very famous. They're very well off financially, and even, you know, it really doesn't discriminate in that regard. So I think it's great to hear your story and for others to share. And I can't believe we're almost at the end of the hour here, but is there anything that you wanted to share too? Anything else that you wanted to mention in terms of your journey, or anything else that you wanted to share with people who are listening on this call right now?
Yeah. I think if there was anything I want to share is that, you know, everyone's journey is very specific and unique. And there's no journey that's better or correct or whatever that is. And when we can embrace even the pain and the wounds, and know that within that there is a gift, there is a light, there is a reason why we're on this specific journey. And if you can seek out the support that really works for you. And I think for me and my specific journey, there was a time and place for therapy. There was a time and place for coaching. And there was a time and place for me to really go deep within like my spirituality and also start to heal my relationship to my culture and the narratives that I was experiencing. There's really so many different modalities out there in terms of healing. And when you give yourself permission to be open to that, I think there's so much beauty in experiencing what is possible. So I think main message is to just really embrace the journey. And it's so cliche, but it's not about the destination. It really is about the journey.
That's really beautiful, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that. I do think there is no one way to practice wellness. There's a lot of different focuses. Everyone's journey is unique. So thank you for sharing that. And Jillian, was there anything else you wanted to share too, or anything you also wanted to add?
I mean, you guys covered a lot of information, so thank you for discussing all of that. I was listening to every word you did say, and Alyssa, thank you for joining us again. I keep looking. My middle name is Alyssa, so I keep looking at your name and wanting to say that. So I apologize. But no, I really appreciate you being open and honest about your journey and your struggles, because that is, very hard to do, even in just therapy, let alone with, strangers. So I think that's very powerful. And thank you for kind of setting a standard almost in a way, and, destigmatizing mental health by doing that. And I mean, there's so many things I would have touched on, but I think, adding the importance of teaching about mental health and well-being in nursing school, I think is, top priority. I think, like you mentioned, you were very interested in preventative care, and that in itself is preventative for nurses going into the field to understand how to take care of themselves and stick up for themselves and prioritize their own well-being, mental, physical, all of the above. So I think we need to make some big changes there. And yeah, so thank you very much. I appreciate everything that you brought to the table today.
Great. Thank you so much, Jillian, and completely agree with what you mentioned, and echoing Alyssa's comments about having this emphasized more in training in schools and really early in these journeys for healthcare professions. And Alyssa, I guess my last question would be, how would your ideal world look like when it comes to well-being in nursing, or just in general? What would that look like?
Oh my God.
Or I guess what would be the ideal? I know that's a big question too, but
I think in the ideal world, I would love if we can just be ourselves and gosh, I think as nurses, there's also this thought of oh gosh, I got to do everything perfectly. And yes, when it comes to patients' health, it's very important to give the right drug or the right dose and things like that, and really critically think. And then when it comes to just ourselves and how we show up, I think there's oftentimes this mask, right? And especially with the pandemic, this figurative mask that we have been wearing. And it's gosh, I think if we can all just kind of let loose and really show ourselves and be kind to each other and understand that as humans, we're okay. It's okay to make mistakes, and being able to fully embrace and accept ourselves as perfectly imperfect, whole, beautiful beings that are supposed to be working in synergy with each other in this healing space. And as nurses, that we are an amazing team of healers, and that there's no hierarchy here. There's no eating the young. There's no pressure. If we can all just like work synergistically with the intention of helping healing our community, I think, I mean, it's kind of like an umbrella like vision, but like, I think that would be, you know, in the ideal world, what I would love to just see.
That's amazing, Alyssa. I would definitely want to live in that world. And we could, you know, I think that that will happen hopefully in the very near future. So I love that vision, and I completely agree. You know, doing away with these, all these, I mean, all those things. There's a lot of things, and really just having people, or giving people permission, or just having people be themselves and accepting people fully and holistically for how they show up and what their journeys are all like. So I love that. And then removing the masks, hopefully physically too, for a while. Things are looking pretty good, so hopefully we're able to. But thank you. That's wonderful. And since we're coming to a close, I just wanted to give you some time to share with others how can people reach you, find you, anything you'd like to share?
Thank you. This was such an amazing and wonderful conversation. And I'm really, really grateful and honored to be invited into this space to talk a little bit more about my journey and what I do and the work that I do. So yeah, if you want to learn more about my work, you can follow me on Instagram at Alyssa Coaching. And also my website is alyssacoaching.com. And right now I actually am offering free clarity coaching calls to anyone who feels like they're resonating with the work that I do. I have a few spaces left in my one-on-one program. So I would love, you know, if anyone is interested or simply just want to connect and talk about this topic, because like I said, I don't feel like we do it enough, and I don't feel like we have enough spaces to do that. If that's something you want to do, like really, please reach out to me, send me a DM, send me an email. I would love, love, love to connect with you.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. And we'll be sure to add some of this information also on our platforms, but we really appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing your journey and for sharing your insights and perspectives. You have so many great things to share, great insights, and we definitely will need to have you back again in the future to talk about so many other things. But we're just so happy to have you, and I'm so happy to you know, see you as a pioneer in this space. So thank you really for being with us. And just wanted to let others on the call know too, if you're interested in learning more about Fifth Window and hearing about other nurses and their journeys with self-care and well-being, we host these monthly spotlights every month. And you can learn more about us as well at fifthwindow.com. So that's FIFTH window.com. And you'll learn about other nurses and other advocates for self-care and well-being, just like Alyssa. So thank you all so much. And Jillian, any other things to add to that as well?
Again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and feel free to always reach out to us with any additional questions on any of our social media platforms.
Sounds good. And you could follow us on social media. If you visit linktree.com/fifthwindow, you could see all our links there, or also on our website. So thank you, everyone, once again. We are so excited to have you all today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next spotlight and the ones after that. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.